Some Hollywood figures left little doubt about their racist views, either through their own words or through works so charged with prejudice that history cannot overlook it. Today, we are going to explore a spectrum of old Hollywood figures who have been confirmed, accused, or rumored to have held racist views or engaged in racist behavior. John Wayne. John Wayne, nicknamed the Duke, epitomized the rugged American hero in countless westerns and war movies. With a career spanning from the 1930s to the 1970s, he became one of Hollywood's most bankable and beloved stars. But Wayne was also outspokenly conservative and, as revealed in a notorious 1971 interview, unabashedly racist in his views. In a candid Playboy magazine interview that has since resurfaced to public outrage, John Wayne plainly stated, "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility." In the same interview, he argued against giving authority to black people whom he termed irresponsible and expressed no remorse about the historical subjugation of minorities. When asked about the dispossession of Native Americans, Wayne responded, "I don't feel we did wrong in taking this great country away from them. The Indians were selfishly trying to keep it for themselves." These shocking pronouncements cemented Wayne's reputation as an unrepentant bigot, in his own words. The fallout from that interview has intensified with time. While Wayne died in 1979, his remarks lay relatively low for years. But in the 21st century, as cultural attitudes shifted, those words ignited widespread condemnation. The interview went viral on social media in 2019, prompting younger audiences to express horror that such a revered movie star could hold these views. Debate erupted over whether it is fair to judge a long-dead actor's statements, but many agreed that Wayne's own openness about his racism makes it impossible to ignore. This modern backlash has tangible consequences for his legacy. Once celebrated without question as an American icon, Wayne is now frequently discussed as an example of Hollywood's entrenched racism. His films are still admired, but audiences view them with a more critical eye toward the man behind the legend. John Wayne's case demonstrates how a star's cultural impact and personal prejudice can collide. D.W. Griffith. Before there were movie stars, there were movie pioneers. In the 1910s, Griffith practically invented modern cinematic storytelling with his groundbreaking epics. His 1915 film, The Birth of a Nation, was a technical masterpiece for its time, pioneering techniques like panoramic battle scenes, cross-cutting, and big-budget spectacle. It became Hollywood's first true blockbuster, and even the first film ever screened at the White House. Yet for all its innovation, The Birth of a Nation is also infamously one of the most racist films ever made. The movie's storyline unabashedly portrays Black Americans as brutish, ignorant villains in the Reconstruction South, and depicts the Ku Klux Klan as heroic saviors of white civilization. As film scholar Ellen Scott describes, this film actually depicts lynching as a positive thing. Certain black people are worthy of being lynched, and it glorifies the KKK as wonderful saviors of the South. The hateful stereotypes are egregious. Griffith's cultural impact is thus a double-edged sword. On one hand, he demonstrated cinema's artistic possibilities. On the other, he embedded vicious racial propaganda into the DNA of Hollywood storytelling. Contemporary reviews in 1915 were mixed. Griffith, stunned by the accusations of bigotry, defensively claimed he never intended to spread hate. In response to the backlash, he even made a follow-up film, Intolerance, as a kind of apology or rebuttal, with themes attacking prejudice. But Intolerance could not erase the powerful racist legacy of its predecessor. Over a century later, film historians still grapple with this paradox. Some argue that we must separate the art from its message. acknowledging the birth of a nation's technical brilliance while condemning its content. Others feel the film's racism so profoundly taints it that Griffith's accolades must be reconsidered. In 1999, the Directors Guild of America took the dramatic step of removing D.W. Griffith's name from its Lifetime Achievement Award, which had been named in his honor since 1953. The DGA's president explained that although Griffith was an innovative filmmaker, he helped foster intolerable racial stereotypes, especially via the heroic portrayal of the KKK in The Birth of a Nation. The move was applauded by the NAACP as the right thing to do, even as some critics decried it as political correctness. Today, D.W. Griffith is remembered as both a father of cinema and a cautionary tale of how art can promote racism. His legacy has undergone a stark reassessment. Al Jolson. In the 1920s and 1930s, few entertainers were as famous as Al Jolson. Dubbed the world's greatest entertainer, Jolson was a Broadway and radio superstar and the star of The Jazz Singer, the first feature film with synchronized sound. That film heralded the end of the silent era and made Jolson a movie star. Culturally, he was a bridge bringing African-American-influenced music to mainstream white audiences. However, Jolson did so while wearing the burnt cork mask of blackface, a practice rooted in racist caricature. In fact, if any single performer is synonymous with blackface minstrelsy in American culture, it is Al Jolson. As one retrospective notes, if blackface has its shameful poster boy, it is Al Jolson. Night after night, Jolson would step on stage with a face painted dark, lips exaggerated, often kneeling with outstretched arms as he belted out songs like My Mammy. Understanding Jolson's legacy is complicated. In his time, many Americans did not view his performances with the same condemnation they elicit today. Blackface was a widely accepted theatrical convention, and Jolson himself claimed to use it as a homage to black music rather than to demean. Indeed, some historians point out that Jolson was unusual for his era, in that he had genuine respect for black performers and even leveraged his status to help them. He was known to have African-American friends, fought against theater segregation on at least one occasion, and promoted black artists' careers behind the scenes. However, good intentions or not, the fact remains that Jolson's core act involved appropriating black culture in a garish, stereotyped form. The laughter and applause he earned came at the expense of authentic black voices, reinforcing the notion that black artistry was only palatable when filtered through a white performer's caricature. Modern scholars and activists thus view Jolson's fame as emblematic of how American entertainment thrived on racism. The mocking exaggerations and racial tropes of minstrelsy were perpetuated by Jolson's blackface performances, even if his intent was to celebrate the music. Today, the sight of Jolson's darkened face and white gloves is jarring and deeply uncomfortable, a reminder of prejudice dressed up as normal fun in old Hollywood. Over time, Jolson's towering popularity waned, and he died in 1950. For a while, he was fondly remembered, but as America's civil rights awareness grew, Jolson's legacy was buried under a layer of shame. For decades, mainstream culture preferred to forget the blackface phenomena he personified. Only recently have reckonings of Hollywood's past dragged Jolson back into discussion, often in the context of what do we do with problematic legends? Some defenders still argue Jolson was not personally racist and that he brought black music to new audiences. Yet many black commentators counter that his success exemplified how a racist society would rather uplift a white man mimicking blackness than allow black performers equal opportunity. The uncomfortable truth is that Jolson, the first movie musical superstar, built his fame on a practice that is now recognized as profoundly racist. His cultural impact is undeniable, but his legacy, once one of pure showbiz glory, has been irrevocably tainted by the specter of blackface. In modern reassessments, Jolson stands as both a trailblazer and a cautionary emblem of entertainment history's racist underpinnings. Robert Mitchum. Actor Robert Mitchum was the quintessential film noir anti-hero. Rising to stardom in the 1940s, he became one of Hollywood's top leading men, known for classics like Out of the Past and The Night of the Hunter. Off-screen, Mitchum cultivated a rebel persona, thumbing his nose at authority and Hollywood convention. But in the early 1980s, that devil-may-care attitude led him into a scandal that revealed deeply offensive views. In February 1983, Esquire magazine published a long interview with the actor in which Mitchum made a series of remarks that shocked readers as racist, anti-Semitic, and sexist. Among the most appalling quotes. He also peppered the conversation with slurs and crude jokes about various groups. At one point, Mitchum was quoted as quipping, "How do you say 'trust me' in Jewish? F you." He disparaged African Americans and women with equal callousness, according to the interviewer's account. The article painted Mitchum as a cranky bigot, and the backlash was immediate. Caught in the PR firestorm, 65-year-old Mitchum backpedaled, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. He wrote an apologetic letter to a Hollywood columnist, insisting that he was sorry and that the offensive lines were a result of him play-acting in jest. Mitchum's rather bizarre explanation was that he had been reciting dialogue from a racist character he once played on stage as a prank on the gullible interviewer. In other words, he said the journalist mistook him for being serious when he was, in fact, in character, satirically. Whether one buys that excuse is debatable. The magazine stood by the story, and Mitchum's image undoubtedly took a hit. While he continued working through the 1980s, the Esquire incident lingered like a toxic cloud in discussions of his legacy. Here was a charismatic star whose on-screen persona had always been a bit of a rogue, now suddenly associated with very real prejudice. In modern times, as film historians look back on Mitchum, they often footnote this controversy. Some argue it showed a side of him reflective of an older generation's ugly biases. Others give him the benefit of the doubt that it truly was a misfired joke. Either way, Robert Mitchum illustrates how a few quotes can forever alter the narrative around a star. His contributions to cinema remain admired, but the memory of that infamous interview still colors conversations, a reminder that even Hollywood's cool cats were not immune to the prejudices of their time. Joan Crawford. Few actresses had as formidable a Hollywood career as Joan Crawford. From the flapper era of the 1920s through the golden age of MGM melodramas and into campy horror in the 1960s, Crawford was a chameleon who won an Oscar and defined the image of the ambitious, glamorous movie star. However, her off-screen reputation was far from spotless. In recent decades, Crawford's personal legacy became dominated by allegations of abusive parenting, but a lesser-known blemish also surfaces. While Crawford did not leave behind a blatant racist interview or manifesto, stories and scenes from her career invite scrutiny. One particularly glaring example is in the 1953 film Torch Song, in which Crawford performs a musical number titled Two-Faced Woman. In the scene, her character dons dark body paint and exaggerated facial makeup to portray a caricatured tropical dance routine. To modern viewers, the choice was inexplicable and offensive. It stands as one of the last instances of blackface in a major Hollywood film. Critics have since lambasted the sequence as cringe-inducing and racist, arguing it should have been unacceptable even in 1953. The fact that Crawford participated in it suggests either a lapse in judgment or an indifference to the racist implications. Some defenders say the number was meant to recreate an old-fashioned vaudeville act, and that Crawford was simply following studio orders. Yet in any case, it is a jarring moment that tarnishes her filmography. Beyond that on-screen misstep, what about Crawford's personal views? Here we enter murkier territory of Hollywood lore. Colleagues described her as steely and often harsh, but not many specific instances of racist behavior are well documented in public sources. One anecdote often repeated in whispers is that Crawford, like many of her contemporaries, likely held the casual prejudices common in mid-century America. There are claims that she could be dismissive or condescending toward domestic staff who were people of color, though solid evidence is scarce and largely anecdotal. Biographies of Crawford focus more on her marriages, feuds, and temperament than any explicit racist incidents. Still, it's worth noting that James Baldwin, the African-American writer, referenced Joan Crawford in an essay about racial imagery in film, analyzing how a white actress like Crawford represented a kind of ideal that left black audiences invisible or alienated. Baldwin's meditations imply that stars of her generation, simply by thriving in a segregated Hollywood that relegated people of color to servant roles, were part of a broader racist structure. In modern reassessment, Crawford's legacy is already complicated. The blackface scene in Torch Song has further marred her image for contemporary viewers. It often leaves first-time audiences aghast that such a revered actress indulged in what is now seen as blatant racism. Film historians contextualize it as a misguided product of its time. Crawford herself never publicly apologized or commented on it. She likely didn't anticipate it becoming a flashpoint. Today, those 3 minutes of Torch Song serve as an uncomfortable footnote to Joan Crawford's story. They exemplify how even Hollywood royalty partook in racism on screen, consciously or not. As with many stars, her cultural impact must now be weighed alongside those aspects of her career that clash with modern values. In Crawford's case, the scales tip both ways. Spencer Tracy. Actor Spencer Tracy was often called the actor's actor, famed for his naturalistic style and everyman appeal. He was a 2-time Oscar winner and starred in classics ranging from Captain's Courageous to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Publicly, Tracy wasn't known for making inflammatory statements. If anything, he cultivated an image of professionalism and, later in life, wisdom. However, Tracy's long career spanned a period of great racial insensitivity in Hollywood. And like many peers, he had his brushes with roles or incidents now viewed as racist. For instance, early in his career, Spencer Tracy appeared in blackface on film. In the 1935 movie Dante's Inferno, Tracy's character participates in a Coney Island sideshow act where he must put on blackface makeup and stick his head through a target for carnival goers to throw balls at. The scene shows a down-and-out Tracy, his face darkened and exaggerated, humiliated for laughs. He remains in blackface for several subsequent scenes of the film. To a modern viewer, it's startling to see the revered Spencer Tracy dressed up in the racist garb of minstrelsy. At the time, the scene was likely intended to illustrate his character's desperate situation, but it unavoidably relies on the stereotype of a comic blackface bit to do so. This reflects how casual and normalized blackface still was in 1930s cinema, even for serious actors. Beyond that on-screen example, one might ask, he generally kept his private opinions private, unlike someone like John Wayne. By many accounts, Tracy was a product of his time. In 1967, a very ill Spencer Tracy filmed Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, a groundbreaking movie about an interracial couple seeking parental approval. Tracy's performance as a white father, coming to accept his daughter's black fiancé, was widely praised. The film directly confronted prejudices of the era and was released just 6 months after interracial marriage was legalized nationwide. In the U.S., Tracy's famous final monologue in that movie, advocating love and understanding, was a powerful statement coming from an actor of Hollywood's old guard. Off-screen, Tracy was reportedly cordial with Poitier and proud of the film's message, though he died just weeks after filming. This late-career choice stands in poignant contrast to his early blackface scene. However, some biographical tidbits do raise eyebrows. It's noted that Tracy, an Irish Catholic from Milwaukee born in 1900, grew up in an era of casual ethnic slurs and may have had ingrained biases. Actress Catherine Houghton once hinted in an interview that Tracy and Hepburn initially had their own reservations or prejudices to overcome in embracing the film's topic. If true, it suggests even liberal Hollywood icons weren't immune to the biases of their upbringing. Still, there aren't well-known incidents of Tracy directing racial epithets at colleagues or anything of that sort on record. His controversies with racism are more in the realm of representation. Notably, on Bad Day at Black Rock, Tracy portrays a World War II veteran defending a Japanese American against racist villains in a Western setting, another role in which he stood firmly on the anti-racist side within the story. Such choices imply that, at least artistically, Tracy lent his prestige to films that criticized racism, even if earlier in his career he hadn't questioned performing in a minstrel bit. Today, Spencer Tracy's legacy as one of the great actors largely remains intact, but historians do acknowledge the blackface episode as part of the full picture of old Hollywood norms. It serves as a reminder that even those who later fought bigotry on screen had, in their past, taken part in demeaning stereotypes. Tracy's evolution in roles mirrors Hollywood's slow evolution in attitudes. In reassessing him, modern audiences can appreciate his progressive films while not glossing over the fact that he had to learn and change over time. Spencer Tracy stands as an example that even people of goodwill can have blind spots, and that redemption, or at least improvement, is possible with changing times. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was once the most popular entertainer in America. He symbolized wholesome mid-century optimism. On the surface, Crosby did not engage in political or racial rhetoric. He was generally viewed as an amiable, non-controversial figure. Unlike John Wayne, Crosby never gave an interview espousing racist views. So why does his name come up in discussions of Hollywood's prejudiced past? Primarily because of the content of some of his films and the rumored biases that occasionally crop up in Hollywood lore. One cannot ignore that Crosby, like many contemporaries, participated in on-screen racial caricature. They sing a number called Abraham while wearing woolly wigs and exaggerated makeup, purportedly to pay tribute to emancipation. Even at the time, some might have winced. Today, broadcasts of Holiday Inn often cut that scene entirely because it is considered so offensive. For many, it's jolting to see the gentle Bing Crosby nonetheless donning the same degrading imagery that Al Jolson did. It suggests that casual racism was so ingrained in Hollywood that even nice guy stars went along with it without a second thought. Beyond that, Crosby also portrayed a blackface minstrel performer in the film Dixie, a fictionalized biopic of Dan Emmett. And in some of his radio shows and comedy sketches, he indulged in ethnic humor typical of the era. Does this mean Bing Crosby was secretly racist? Some who knew him would disagree. He had African-American friends and colleagues, and was reportedly colorblind in personal interactions for his time. The rumors that tag Crosby's legacy are not of virulent hatred, but more of a complacency with the racial norms of his day. One oft-cited item is that Crosby was a strict conservative man off-screen, and some wonder if those attitudes extended to racial hierarchy as well. There isn't a well-publicized incident of Crosby making a racist comment in public. The ambiguity arises from the contrast between his inclusive actions and the racist depictions he participated in on film, as well as the general milieu of Hollywood in which he thrived. Modern audiences, especially younger generations, have been surprised to learn of Crosby's blackface performances. It introduces a discomfort in enjoying his work. On forums and articles, viewers grapple with this duality. Some separate the art from the context. Others feel it's important to call it out and not give a pass. Thus, Bing Crosby's legacy hasn't been cancelled by any means, but it has been complicated. He is a prime example of a star who wasn't an obvious racist by personal crusade, yet the specter of racism touches his career due to the times he lived in and the entertainment choices he made. In reassessment, Crosby remains beloved for his talents, but with a more nuanced understanding that even the gentlest stars of old Hollywood were touched by the racism of their environment, and that acknowledging this is part of viewing history honestly. Greer Garson. Actress Greer Garson was the epitome of refinement and grace in 1940s Hollywood. A British-born redhead with a dignified air, she rose to fame in films like Mrs. Miniver, for which she won an Oscar portraying a heroic English housewife in World War II. Garson became associated with sophisticated, noble characters and was one of MGM's top stars during the war years. Unlike some others on this list, Garson never had a public scandal or controversy to her name. So where do racism allegations enter the picture? Here we tread into territory of rumor and subtle observation more than documented fact. Some film historians have noted that Garson, like many British elites of her generation, may have harbored a certain colonial-era racial snobbery or class prejudice, though nothing explicit is on record. For example, there were unconfirmed murmurs that Garson, off the record, expressed distaste for interacting with people of color in certain situations, or that she supported practices that we would now consider discriminatory. It is also possible that Greer Garson's inclusion in discussions of rumored racism stems from guilt by association. All her famous roles were in overwhelmingly white casts. Hollywood did not often place someone like Garson in integrated stories. In fact, one of her late 1940s films, Adventure with Clark Gable, features black actress Hattie McDaniel in a small role as a maid. There is no report of Garson mistreating McDaniel or any co-star. However, some commentators note that Garson, as a powerful star, never objected to the segregated status quo on set that we know of. In absence of clear incidents, one might consider Garson's legacy in terms of modern reassessment of her films. Take Mrs. Miniver, for instance. Modern critics sometimes point out these omissions in Golden Age films, questioning whether stars like Garson ever considered those racial blind spots, or if they simply mirrored the Eurocentric worldview of their times. Greer Garson's image was so carefully managed by the studio that any uglier personal views would have been swept under the rug. It's telling that, unlike some contemporaries, she left behind no embarrassing quotes. The rumors, to the extent they exist, might come from second-hand accounts, or the general understanding that an upper-class British woman born in 1904 likely had some antiquated views on race. Today, Greer Garson is less remembered by the general public, but classic film enthusiasts still celebrate her performances. In those circles, one doesn't often hear her name dragged through controversy. If anything, the racism attached to Garson's legacy is more about the films she was in rather than any specific action of hers. Thus, any reassessment is gentle. Garson's legacy remains largely positive, her charity work and classy roles fondly recalled, with only a cautious footnote that, like virtually all in her day, she may have held views or participated in norms that contemporary society would criticize. In sum, she represents the kind of rumored case where there's smoke but no confirmed fire. Shirley Temple. In any discussion of old Hollywood and racism, it's striking to realize that even children were not exempt from the prejudices of the time. Shirley Temple, the dimpled, curly-haired child superstar of the 1930s, is a prime example. Shirley herself was just a little girl, blissfully naive about politics. She charmed Depression-era audiences with songs and dances that exuded wholesome joy. But embedded in some of her most famous scenes are racial elements that now raise concern. Notably, Shirley Temple appeared in blackface in at least one film, and several of her movies trafficked in racial stereotypes common to that era's family entertainment. For instance, in The Littlest Rebel, a Civil War set film, Shirley plays the daughter of a Confederate soldier. In one sequence, in order to evade Union troops, the character is disguised in blackface makeup to look like an enslaved child. Young Shirley performs a dance in this getup, an image that, while cute by 1935 standards, is highly uncomfortable now. In other movies like Dimples or Just Around the Corner, Shirley often interacted with black actors in scenes that, while groundbreaking in showing an interracial dance duo, still often relegated the black characters to servile roles or comic relief. The famous staircase tap dance she performed with Bojangles in The Little Colonel is beloved. Yet even that film, set in the post-Civil War South, soft pedals the realities of slavery and portrays Shirley as a winsome Southern belle who just loves her Uncle Billy. Walter Brennan. Walter Brennan's kindly grandpa image masked a militant worldview. On sets, he railed against civil rights agitators, claimed Watts protesters should be stopped with a machine gun, built a home bunker stocked for a coming race war, and, according to multiple crew members, laughed when news of Dr. King's assassination broke. His talent remains undisputed, but modern retrospectives treat Brennan as proof that even Hollywood's most beloved character actor could be fiercely segregationist off-camera. Mickey Rooney. Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, glitters, until Rooney lurches in as upstairs neighbor Mr. Yunyoshi. Thick prosthetic eyelids, buck teeth, a garbled accent, and slapstick gongs created what scholars call one of cinema's most offensive Oriental caricatures. The performance is now cut from many broadcasts and singled out in film school What Went Wrong lectures. Rooney defended the part late in life, yet the role stands as textbook proof of mainstream, profit-driven racism in post-war Hollywood. Fred Astaire, the otherwise dazzling Swing Time, 1936, stops modern viewers cold when Astaire enters the Bojangles of Harlem number in full blackface. Intended as homage to Bill Bojangles Robinson, the routine freezes a brilliant dancer inside minstrel imagery. One critic calls it positive racism that is still racism. Astaire later voiced respect for black hoofers, but the scene reminds us that even Hollywood's classiest icon helped normalize minstrel aesthetics. Henry Ford, not an actor but a financier whose wealth touched early Hollywood, Ford bankrolled The International Jew, a 4-volume anti-Semitic screed that Hitler later cited as inspiration. He reprinted 500,000 copies and mailed them nationwide, fueling conspiracy myths of Jewish control in media and film. When studios courted Ford for car placements or charity galas, his bigotry quietly tagged along, an uncomfortable reminder that anti-Semitism could bankroll the Dream Factory. Mae West. Biographers note West championed anti-lynching bills and hired black talent on stage. Yet in private, she allegedly cracked slurs about Latino neighbors and referred to her black maids with minstrel nicknames, behavior dissected in academic essays on Mae West's Maids. Her legacy teeters between trailblazing sexual liberator and star who still leaned on casual household racism common to 1930s showbiz. Katharine Hepburn. No smoking gun interview exists, but some crew from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner recalled Hepburn needing persuasion before embracing the script's interracial marriage theme. Others remember her firing a housekeeper with a racial slur. Unverified yet persistent Hollywood lore. Because Hepburn's persona was progressive, even faint whispers of prejudice complicate the saintly New England image she cultivated. Charlie Chaplin. J. Edgar Hoover's files painted Chaplin as immoral, communist, and racially elitist. Some journalists repeated anecdotes that he mocked Mexican extras and Southern blacks on early Keystone sets. None are definitively proven, and admirers note Chaplin's marriage to Una O'Neill angered segregationists. Thus, Chaplin sits in limbo, a champion of the downtrodden on-screen, yet shadowed by rumors of private disdain. Errol Flynn. Charles Hyam's 1980 bestseller alleged Flynn spied for Nazis and voiced white supremacist views. Subsequent biographers debunked most claims, yet wartime party photos with Nazi diplomats and diary quips about mongrel races keep the question alive. Even if unproven, the saga shows how thin evidence can still cloud a legend's memory when race and war ideology intersect. Leslie Howard. Best remembered as Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, Howard's pre-war press tours occasionally referenced the simple natives of Africa in a tone today read as colonial condescension. No explicit slurs survive, so historians rate him racially typical for an imperial Brit, not overtly hateful, yet his polite prejudice contrasts sharply with his anti-Nazi propaganda work, illustrating the contradictions of liberal imperialists.